Good day, classmates, especially to our instructor, Sir Jesse de la Cruz. Well, how are you doing today? Are you excited to know and understand more about Canterbury Tales? We are so excited too. So keep on watching and listening until the end of our report, and let's discover Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. To understand better the Canterbury Tales, it's important to understand its author, Geoffrey Chaucer. Chaucer was born in London in the 1340s, but his exact birth date is unknown. As a teenager, Chaucer worked as a royal page, and later he traveled widely throughout Europe as an emissary for the king. These positions give him the opportunity to meet people from all social classes and many different countries. Chaucer became fluent in several languages, including French and Italian. The Canterbury Tales reflects Chaucer's colorful background. Most of the tales themselves are based on existing stories. Chaucer was one of the first writers to write a complex literary work in the English language. He set a precedent that generation of the authors would follow. Chaucer established the use of pentameter, a verse line consisting of 5 two-syllable units. After publication, the Canterbury Tales pentameter this stuck in trade on English verse for the next 500 years, used in epic poetry, narrative poems, and even underscoring the work of William Shakespeare. Chaucer's work was able to showcase distinct characters, all with their own voice and style, giving readers an overview of society across classes and occupations. None of Chaucer's original manuscript has survived. Medieval scribes uncopied various compilations of the work. These beautifully illustrated manuscripts were popular even before. The first printed version was published in 1478. By this time, scholars agreed on Chaucer's brilliance in weaving together a rich tapestry of characters and genres. The Canterbury Tales is still considered one of the greatest works of English literature. This popularity as a work that both entertains and teaches has not faded at all. There are a number of characters in the Canterbury Tales. First is Chaucer. Chaucer narrates the framed story and tells his own tales on the road to Canterbury, considered separate from Geoffrey Chaucer, the actual author. He is a smart observer, providing detailed descriptions of the other pilgrims, and he has a flair for satire. He characterizes the pilgrims in unflattering ways, while maintaining an earnest, even admiring tone. When his turn to share stories arrives, he tells a silly story and then a tedious one. Harry Bailey is the host of the Tabard Inn, and is a cheerful and impulsive man. He is taken with the assembled pilgrims at his inn, and decides to accompany them. He is the one who suggests the storytelling contest and sets the rules, planning to judge the stories and provide the winner's reward. A host in every sense of the word, he is quick to make peace when an argument breaks out, and he often steers the stories away from the overly somber and toward merriment. The Knight. The knight represents the ideal medieval Christian man-at-arms. He has participated in no less than 15 of the great crusades of his era. Brave, experienced, and prudent, the narrator greatly admires him. The knight is the teller of the first tale. The Wife of Bath, a middle-aged woman with a gap between her front teeth, which was considered attractive in Chaucer's time. A seamstress by occupation, she has been married 5 times and had many other affairs in her youth. She has traveled on pilgrimages to Jerusalem 3 times and elsewhere in Europe as well. The pardoner is a dishonest craftsman who sells items that he claims are relics of the saints, but mostly these are fraudulent. He is very good at what he does, and he freely admits he only in it for the money. The miller is stout and brawny. The miller has a wart on his nose and a big mouth, both literally and figuratively. He threatens the host's notion of propriety when he drunkenly insists on telling second tale. He ruins the host's carefully planned storytelling order. The prioress, described as the modest and quiet this prioress, a nun who is head of her convent, aspires to have exquisite taste. Her table manners are dainty. She knows French. She dresses well, and she is charitable and compassionate. The monk. Monks of the Middle Ages live in monasteries according to rule of Saint Benedict, which demanded that they devote their lives to work and prayer. This monk cares little for the rule. His devotion is to hunting and eating. He is large, loud, and well clad in hunting boots and furs. The friar. Chaucer's Franciscan friar is a roaming priest with no formal ties to a monastery. Chaucer describes him as a worldly, always ready to befriend young women and or rich men who might need his services. He administers sacraments in his town, especially those of marriage and confession. The summoner. The summoner brings persons accused of violating church law to a ecclesiastical court. This summoner is a licentious man whose face is scarred by leprosy. He gets drunk frequently, is irritable, and is not particularly qualified for his position. He spouts the few words of Latin he knows in an attempt to sound educated. The parson. The parson is the only devout churchman in the company. He lives in poverty but is rich in holy thoughts and deeds. He is everything that the monk, the friar, and the pardoner are not. The parson preaches the gospel and practices what he preaches. The squire is the knight's son, an apprentice. The squire is curly-haired, youthfully handsome, and loves dancing and courting. The clerk is a poor student of philosophy, having spent his money on books and learning rather than on fine clothes. He is threadbare and wan. He speaks little, but when he does, his words are wise and full of moral virtue. A man of law, a successful lawyer commissioned by the king. He upholds justice in matters large and small, and knows every statute of England's law by heart. A municipal was in charge for getting provisions for a college or court. Despite his lack of education, this municipal is smarter than the 30 lawyers he feeds. The merchant trades in furs and other clothes, mostly from Flanders. He is part of a powerful and wealthy class in Chaucer's society. The shipman, browned, skinned from years of sailing, has seen every bay and river in England, and exotic ports in Spain and Carthage as well. He is a bit of a rascal, known for stealing wine while the ship's captain sleeps. The physician. The narrator describes the life of the physician, who is described as one of the best in his profession. The narrator questions the character's spiritual and physical health because he rarely consults the Bible and has an unhealthy love of financial gain. In Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, a franklin is a freeman, not a vassal to a lord or member of the nobility. The word franklin means freeman. The reeve. A reeve was a steward of a manor and performed his job shrewdly. A reeve's lord never loses so much as a ram to the other employees. The vassals under his command are kept in line, but he steals from his master. When the miller tells a story about a jealous, foolish carpenter, it angers the reeve who is a carpenter himself. The plowman is the parson's brother and is equally good-hearted. A member of the peasant class, the guildsmen. English guilds were a combination of labor unions and social fraternities. Craftsmen of similar occupation joined together to increase their bargaining power and live communally. All 5 guildsmen are clad in the livery of their brotherhood as well as their respective guilds. The cook. The cook works for the guildsmen. Chaucer gives little detail about him, although he mentions a crusty sore on the cook's leg. The yeoman. The servant who accompanies the knight and the squire. The second nun. The second nun is not described in the general prologue, but she tells a saint's life for her tale. The nun's priest. Like the second nun, the nun's priest is not described in the general prologue. His story of Chanticleer, however, is well crafted and suggests that he is a witty, self-effacing preacher.
So the setting of the story is the action begins at a tavern just outside of London, circa 1390, where a group of pilgrims have gathered in the preparation for their journey to visit the shrine of St. Thomas Becket in Canterbury. There are 10 main events in the story, which is the one spring day, the narrator of the Canterbury tells, rents a room at the Tavern Inn before he recommences his journey to the Canterbury. And the second one is that evening a group of people arrive at the inn, and also warm are also going to Canterbury to receive a blessing of the holy blissful martyr St. Thomas Becket. Calling themselves pilgrims before of their destination, they accept the narrator into their company. And next is the narrator is describing a pilgrims very skillfully. He lists them as per their rank and status. Those contain a lot of interesting stories which will reveal the character of any pilgrims. And after that is the host proposes a plan to the group. He says that on the way to Canterbury, each pilgrim must tell 2 tales and then 2 on the return journey. And further, he goes to say that the pilgrim with the best tale will get a free dinner at the tavern when the journey ends. Moreover, he also states that anyone challenging his judgment will have to pay the bill for whole pilgrimage. This excites the pilgrims and all of them agree to this proposal. Moreover, he also states that anyone challenging his judgment will have to pay the bill for the whole pilgrimage. This excites the pilgrims and all of them agree to this proposal. Moreover, they also swear to follow the rules of this game. They ride out of the Canterbury the next morning when the tale-telling session begins. However, in no time, a pilgrim challenges the authority of the host. At the end of the first tale, Monk asks to tell a tale, but the drunken miller wishes to then take the next turn or leave. Further, we go on to see the host authority being challenged. After all, it was inevitable with the drunken pilgrim and mystifying strangers put together. On the journey, we get to hear different types of stories from the pilgrims. However, they now start talking personal digs at each other. For instance, when a miller tells a degrading tale about carpenter, the latter, in return, gets offended. Thus who whips up the tale, humiliating the miller. And this keeps repeating with the host struggle to resolve the conflicts arising continually. However, it's up only after 24 tales, instead of intended 120. So this is the last. Finally, it ends with a sermon which a parson gives. It is about sin and repentance, and concludes with Chaucer withdrawals. So the style of the author is Chaucer style is marked by lucidity of expression, joyous originality, and essence free of ambiguities and direct philosophical maxims. It describing nearly all characters, he used colonial language easy to understand for a common man. His style is not bookish or cramped. His style is rather cultivated and tailored as much to the intellectuals as to the layman, humorous and ironical. Springtime, the Canterbury tales open in April. At the height of spring, the birds are chirping, the flowers blossoming, and people long in their hearts to go in pilgrimage, which combine travel, vacation, and spiritual renewal. The springtime symbolizes rebirth and fresh beginnings, and it does appropriate for the beginning of Chaucer text. Springtime also evokes erotic love, as evidenced by the moment when Palamon first sees Emily's gathering fresh flower to make garlands in honor of May. The squire, too, participates in this symbolism. His devotion to country love is compared to the freshness of the month of May. Clothing. In the general prologue, the description of garments, in addition, the narrator's own shaky collections, helps to define each character, in a sense that clothes symbolize what lies beneath the surface of each personality. The physician love of wealth reveals itself most clearly to us in the rich silk and fur of his gown. The squire's youthful vanity. Clothing. In the general prologue, the description of garments, in addition to the narrator's own shaky recollection, helps to define each character, and in a sense, the clothes symbolize what lies beneath the surface of each personality. The physician's love of wealth reveals itself mostly clearly to us in the rich silk and fur of his gown. The squire's youthful vanity is symbolized by the excessive floral brocade on his tunic. The merchant's fork bread cold symbolizes his duplicity, at which Chaucer only hits. Physiognomy was a science that judged person temperament and character based on his or her anatomy. Physiognomy plays a significant role in Chaucer's description of the pilgrims in the general prologue. The most exaggerated facial features are those of the peasant. The miller represent the stereotypical peasant. Physiognomy was clearly round and ruddy. With a wart on his nose, the miller appears rude and therefore suited to rude. Simple work, the Pardon's glaring eyes and deep hair illustrate his fraudulence. Chaucer uses imagery to explore three different themes: romance, sex, and violence, in order to create a complex plot. The use of romance and sexual imagery is often carried out together, as if to evoke a direct contrast for the audience. The conflict of the story is man versus man. The struggles between characters manifested in the links between tales mostly involve clashes between social classes, differing states, and competing professions. There are also clashes between sexes, and there are resistance to the host's somewhat tyrannical leadership.
The Canterbury Tales uses the first-person point of view in the general prologue, and the frame narrative, Chaucer the narrator, speaks from his own perspective on the events of the story contest, and the pilgrims who tell the tales. The first themes is the social satire. Social satire is the major theme of the Canterbury Tales. The medieval society was set on three foundations: the nobility, the church, and the peasantry. Chaucer's satire targets all segments of medieval social issues, human immorality, and the free heart. For example, he exposes each social layers of his pilgrims and beautifully illustrates how they feel to fulfill their actual duties. He further shows the theme of social satire in the nun's praise tale that satirizes courtly love and sets aside standard of dignity. The wife of Bath's tale mocks the religious logic as the wife interprets the Bible verses in her own way to support her argument. The second theme is courtly love and sexual desire. Courtly love in the medieval setup is something novel and spiritual that does not mean to be achieved physically. The Knight's Tale in the general prologue is an obvious example of courtly love where two knights fight for the hand of a fair lady. The third theme is competition. Competition is another major theme in the Canterbury Tales. It is explicitly stated in the tales as well as present among the pilgrims. The Knight's Tale is set on the theme of competition where two prisoners fall in love with the same girl. Both are at good terms, but the lady becomes the bone of contention and makes them opponent of each other. The last but not the least is Christianity. The thematic significance of Christianity can be marked by the fact that the tales take place in a religious setting where everyone is going on a religious pilgrimage. Most of the notable figures of the church, the monk, the nun, the parson, and the friar are detailed in the general prologue, representing distinct areas of the church of that time. Some of them are true worshippers of Christ, while the others are corrupt. Therefore, Chaucer has artistically painted the pictures of the custodians of the church having spoiled the true spirit of Christianity. Depiction of the different social classes of the 14th century CE, as well as clothing worn, pastimes enjoyed, and language or expressions used.